all up if we have this turn out tomorrow. This is record, y'all, for anything we've ever done at RPCC, and that's to your credit. Thank you so much for coming to this. As you've heard, this week is called Banned Books Week. The American Library Association designated this as that week to celebrate literature that has been banned or censored or contested, what have you. But we have taken that to the bigger scale, that what we're really talking about is ideas and thoughts and expression. As Mr. Sexton was talking about, it's really ideas that are getting censored or banned or what have you. And so all of our speakers this week are not people who are talking about literature per se, but other disciplines that relate to that. The books are always ever present, but they're talking about the deeper issues involved. And we're very lucky today to have Dr. Terry Byars, our theater professor, to talk to us about censorship and the history of theater, you know, the history of censorship with theater, the theatrical arts. And so without further ado, give it over to Dr. Byars.
All right, censorship and theater. The newspaper review called the play a mass of vulgarity, egotism, coarseness, and absurdity. This disgusting representation, an open drain, a loathsome sore unbandaged, a dirty act done publicly, absolutely loathsome and fetid. Was this the New York Times telling us what it thought of the musical Hair, which opened on Broadway in the spring of 1968, which confronted the audience with song lyrics about the joys of cocaine and masturbation, and featured a scene where the cast gets totally naked? Or are we talking here about the review of O Calcutta, which opened in June of 1969 and featured not only unabashed total male and female nudity, but also simulated sex acts on stage? No. The review I just read you came from the London Daily Telegraph, date 1881, condemning to the fires of hell a play by Ibsen called Ghosts, which had the audacity to mention the word syphilis. Ouch. Censorship in the theater has always been with us. From that moment in the fogs of prehistory, when some poor sucker stood up and said, "Look at me, I'm acting," there's always been some pontificating blowhard standing nearby, ready to say, "Okay, you're pretty good, but cut that spooky face at the end. It'll scare the children." Yeah, the censor has always been with us. So, how do you get to be a censor? I mean, sign me up for that job, because you're pretty powerful, right? Telling folks what to do? Exactly. And that's the key. Power. Because you can only be a censor because you've already got a powerful job. Like, say, the job of king. Or maybe prime minister, or maybe you're already some kind of power broker, like a Senate majority leader. From those power jobs, it's easy to make a lateral move into the job of censor, where you can slice and dice the work of any play or playwright because it's what you want as the censor. So obviously, censorship in the theater has always been kind of an erratic thing, dispensed by the whims of the prevailing power brokers, who set themselves up as arbiters of free taste in any given time or place. Well, take ancient Greece, for instance. Along about the 400s BC, the rule was you couldn't show any violence on stage. That was an ethical and moral no-no. But you could show the result of violence by wheeling on the bloody, mangled corpse after the deed was done. Who knew where that weird rule came from? I guess the Greeks didn't want to tempt fate, with an actor accidentally plunging his dagger into the heart of a fellow actor. Well, and no wonder. The retractable switchblade, like the kind they used in West Side Story, hadn't been invented yet. If I were a Greek actor, I guess I would thank the censor for that one. But the pendulum always swings. inevitably. And so we have, just a few short centuries later, in the theater of ancient Rome, not only violence is accepted as an act on stage, but where copious, unremitting bloodshed is the order of the day, where whole platoons of slaves are, say, eaten alive in a matter of minutes by a pack of crazed and starving lions on the stage of the Colosseum. You could question that this display could be defined as theater, but it was entertaining. Well, at least to a few of those power brokers, like the Emperor Caligula, who, one might say, lost all sense of censorship when, in a brilliant display of stagecraft, made his horse a member of the Senate. He was himself censored for that theatrical gambit when he was murdered in a hallway by his own guards. What an exit. In Shakespeare's day, we're talking roughly 1591 to 1612, when he stopped writing plays. Censorship had turned an absurd corner under the edicts by the first Queen Elizabeth's own Privy Council that no woman could appear on stage in any form or fashion. The result of this odd ban was that prepubescent boys were pressed into service as women on stage, thus creating the eye-popping situation of men wooing men in various ways in hundreds of plays. Until Charles II put a stop to all this in 1660, when, through a sensational overturn of censorship, he commanded women to be women on stage, one of whom he quickly plucked from the stage, the famous actress Nell Gwynn, to be his mistress. Well, one of his mistresses. Well, it's a fact of history. Charles loved women, on stage and off. Lots of them. Charles II opened the floodgates for all sorts of interesting topics to be addressed on stage, especially sexual ones, since we now had bona fide women providing lots of delicious and real sexual chemistry to any scene involving even the hint of lovemaking. And business was booming. Until that ridiculous pendulum swung again. In the annals of theater history, it was one of the most dastardly, foul, underhanded political moves ever perpetrated against those who make plays happen, especially the playwright. And its gale force winds affected both British and American theater incredibly for the next 231 years. This sensorial tsunami was called the Licensing Act of 1737. And here's how it happened. There came to reside on the throne of England in 1714 a German prince who spoke no English. Go figure. Okay. This was George I. Since George spoke only German, he virtually left the running of his government to his Prime Minister, Sir Robert Walpole. When old George died, his son, George II, kept Walpole on the payroll, thus ceding to Walpole ever-increasing power in state affairs. By this time, satirists, especially playwrights, were having a field day with old Walpole, now conferring on him the derogatory title of England's first Prime Minister. Wow, that had to hurt. Playwrights lampooned him as a power-hungry mobster whose greed had run amok while doing such unspeakable acts as spooning with the Queen. But the straw that broke old Walpole's back was a play called A Vision of the Golden Rump. And I leave you to figure out all the implications of that double entendre. Walpole's revenge was swift. He went right to Parliament and had it enact the Licensing Act of 1737, which forbade the production of any play until it was first submitted to the Lord Chamberlain's office and then approved to be acted on stage. The Licensing Act of 1737 was Walpole's personal vendetta, creating a censorship god that would have its way for the next 2 centuries. The power broker strikes again. What remained in the wake of Walpole's legislation were, of course, the stillborn corpses of plays that would never be written, because, as the writer Arnold Bennett said, he's dead now, immediately you begin to get near the things that really matter in a play. You begin to think about the censor, and then it's all over with your play. And so what the British theater gives birth to in the 1800s is a kind of sentimental melodrama, morality plays, if you will, where good triumphs over evil and virtue reigns supreme. And of course, this whitewashed, paper-thin version of life finds its way to America, where the real power brokers are the clergy. Amen. Most of whom have been weaned on the acid milk of a Puritanism that sees any kind of theater as coming directly from the mind of Satan. Oh yes, the clergy as censor in America is alive and fighting tooth and nail well into the 20th century to prevent such fiendish playwrights as Ibsen and George Bernard Shaw from producing their germ-infested dramas which might touch on the right of a woman, say, to throw off the tyranny of an abusive husband if need be. Oh yes, such stomach-churning topics as this, which, as every good moral American knew, was telegraphed directly from the pit of hell. There is a final swing to our pendulum, and it comes in that banner year, 1968. By that point in England, playwrights, directors, and audiences had enough of bowing to an old antiquated law that quibbled over the sight of, 2 guys in bed together, which, by the way, had occurred in John Osborne's play, A Patriot for Me, which had been excoriated by the Lord Chamberlain's office, but had gone on to win Best Play of 1965 anyway. Lo and behold, the new power broker had become the audience itself. And now it was not to be dictated by some creaky old curmudgeon sitting in the Lord Chamberlain's office. And thus it came to pass. Through massive public outcry, the old Licensing Act of 1737 was abolished under the 1968 Theaters Act. America, too, was reaping the benefits of a new audience that resonated with the new mood of the times, and that new mood demanded a total renovation of old moral codes. Waiting in the Wings was a theatrical piece that would perfectly accommodate that new mood. In the spring of that banner year, 1968, the musical Hair would open to unparalleled acclaim on Broadway, featuring, yes, lyrics about the joys of cocaine and masturbation, and a scene of unabashed, refreshing nudity just before the close of the first act. A signature song from that show, Let the Sunshine In, swept the country as a kind of mantra for the new freedoms theater would experience in the coming decades, and especially freedoms from those old and crusted forms of censorship that had plagued playwrights for centuries. From the moment that song was sung, the audience, the new power broker, walked through a door, leaving the old censor mumbling his antiquated maxims in a corner. We, the audience, walked through that door together, and we've never looked back. Thank you.
I'd like to open the floor for the next 5 minutes or so for any questions for Dr. Byars.
Yes, ask me any questions that you desire. And I'd like to respond to that first question. Anyway.
May I ask you one?
Well, you may, Dr. Ben.
It's a theme throughout your whole talk, but just to put a coda on it, what is it that makes people want to censor in your estimation?
I think what makes like the power brokers want to censor is a sort of prevailing moral attitude of the time, according to what any society deems ethical or moral, particularly moral. Okay. And so to me, so that is taken up by a very powerful voice, usually someone in government, like a king or a governing body, and then spit out there as, this is the way the cow ate the cabbage. We see things this way. We don't see things this way, and so we're going to censor you because you're not kowtowing to a certain code that this society we deem appropriate. Did I answer your question? Or did I sound like, some politician talking all around the sun? Like when you ask them a question, like, why are you running for political office? And they'll say, and of course I think the economy is, and they go off on some. Anyway, did I answer that to your satisfaction? All right. You all seem mute and drugged. What?
Okay.
Is it the right? Is it the hour? Have you not eaten yet? Your blood sugar is probably very low at this point. I'm going to have a bag of chips myself when I finish because I'm about to faint. Anyway.
I have a question. Do you think the rating systems for the movies to rate PG and 13 and all, do you think that's some type of censorship or just guidelines?
Absolutely. And of course I did not touch on movies because it is a form of theater, but it's another stream, a tributary from that. But definitely the ratings hierarchy, G, PG, PG-13, R, NC-17. What was the question?
Do you think that it's a form of censorship?
It's definitely a form of censorship because it arose out of what we call the Hays Code. And the Hays Code occurred in 1930, but it was really not enforced until 1934. Before 1930, in particularly American movies, the Joker was wild. We could see bare breasts, we could see nudity, language not pretty much nothing was censored. All right, but because of the prevailing mood of the times, especially coming from Hayes himself was a Presbyterian minister, from my recollection. Well, here we go, a power broker. Yeah, in America, the church has a lot to say about what is, or say the church, the world of the church. Okay, so yes, absolutely, that rating. Now, the Hays Code then began to tell the American Picture Association, whatever those initials are. I'm not good at that. But what it could and could not show in the movies, all right? And that was a pretty stiff regulatory thing from about 1934 until, guess what year? 1968. See, 1968 turns out to be the sea change year in our American culture. So it's like a paradigm shift happens in 1968, where it's the year of freedom. Well, the year of free love had happened before that, but so much the society rises up and says, no, we're not accepting this. So yeah, the Hays Code turns into, as those very strict dictums that they sent to the Picture Association started disintegrated. It disintegrated into a rating system, and so, but it definitely is a form of. It came out of a very heavy form of censorship, but now it's sort of a light form of censorship. I think it's up to the parent now, unless it's NC-17, where it might be up to the guy at the movie. Yeah, are you under 17? No, I'm not. I'm 18. I just look 12. Anyway, yeah. It comes out of the famous Hayes office in the movie industry. And actually, the movie industry became. I'm answering for because nobody else is asking a question. I'll just blabber on and on. Because the Hayes actually, the movie industry was glad for that code, because I'm better now. I'm better now. My blood sugar's up. The American Movie Picture Association became almost self-regulating. They didn't want government to interfere. So that Hayes Code was almost a boon because it gave the movie industry itself a chance to regulate itself. And so some people consider that a very good thing, But anyway, so other questions? Jane?
We have hair, and since then everything's been kind of cool and groovy, and people can be naked and whatever.
Yeah.
But then, a couple of years ago, there was the whole hubbub about Equus on Broadway, about Daniel Radcliffe being naked and in love with the horses and all
Harry
that.
Potter naked on stage?
Yeah.
Oh my God, no, that's immoral. Take him away, take him away. He needs that thing on his forehead and a sword. He doesn't need a... That's the wrong sword.
Well, first, I think it's interesting because the same people who are complaining about that are the people complaining about Harry Potter in the first place. But do you think
Which is probably the
people who think that wizardry is bad?
Which is probably the... Really? Yeah,
Right.
Church.
But do you think that there's a resurgence in censorship going on, or was that an isolated incident?
But then you have to ask yourself, what action really was taken? Did they remove Daniel Radcliffe and
No,
that
there was
play?
a lot of protesting.
There was protest, but there was no governing agency because the Theatres Act of 1968 in Britain, where he did play, was dead. So they weren't going to take that play off. I don't know where he did it, the Old Vic or wherever, or the Barbican or whatever. But there was protest, and there will always be protests because, certain segments of our society will not see things like the playwright will see. But the deal is he was not removed from the stage, and that play did not close, Like, for instance, when I mentioned John Osborne's play in 1965, that was right before the 1968 Act. It could not open. It was censored heavily, and then it was forbidden to be produced in a licensed theater. The reason John Osborne won that award is because he produced his play in a private club, which was not a public venue. Okay, so of course they went to it in droves, the audience, and they heard about it, and it was proclaimed best play of 1965 without ever having been sanctioned. So, what's your question again? So, no, I think there will always be protests, but I think the era of heavy censorship that will actually stop a play, at least I'm talking about England and America. Of course, France has never censored anything, whatever. I mean, je m'en nudity de battle, But anyway, I think those days are gone. They're gone. There was a period, I lived in New York myself in the early 70s. I was planning to become a very, very, very famous actor. Overnight, and that didn't quite happen. Not even over, but what I saw, and I was in New York in like 71, and what I saw was every play, every musical had to have a nude scene, obligatory. It's like obligatory. Where's the nude people? After 1968, it was like, whoa! You know, after Old Calcutta, it's like, we got to have that nude scene, okay? And so I saw more nudity on stage that year than I've seen since in the theater. So anyway, I hope that answers your question a little bit. I think the days of heavy censorship like that are pretty well dead in America and, you know, Britain.
It seems like Britain's a little bit more
freer than America. We still have very strong voices in America, especially, well, I don't want to get political here, but you know, there's a very strong, well, fundamentalist, you know, element in various, you know, religious systems that, you know, have a moral code that just does not gee-haw with, like, nudity on stage or other, you know, subject matter that would not be considered, you know, appropriate. Okay. Yes, sir.
Why do you think it eats at people so much? Because I see people, like even the religious people, I see them speaking it and then go and do things that obviously is against their religion, but they don't go and protest what they're doing. They only protest things like what you're talking about, like, you know, that kind of censorship of nudity and things like that.
So is that a question or a
statement?
Yeah,
like why do you think it eats at people so much? Why do you think they choose that over going protest other things?
Theater?
Yes.
Like what other things?
Like, I don't know. I think theater is like, I'm trying to get in the question for you, but
well, like say for instance, like what's the name of that place that sells men clothing for young people in the mall?
Abercrombie, American Eagle.
Yeah, there was one. There was, anyway, a few years back, I forget his name too, Dobson, Dr. Dobson, took issue with a commercial, a marketing campaign, and where young people were, you know, sort of partially naked.
Calvin Klein.
It could be Calvin Klein, yeah, okay. But anyway, there was famous just a few years ago, Dr. Dobson, who of course is an evangelical. That would be an instance of non-theater, you know, attempted censorship. So your question is, why do you think it eats so much?
Why do you think theater people get so eaten up inside? Because, you know, like my thing is, if you don't want to see it, don't go look.
Yeah, okay. Well, theater, let's face it, is, I mean, theater, not movies, but theater is a live proposition. You know, you go and sit there, and there are live people doing that in front of you. Okay, so that's a lot more in your face than, say, a picture in a magazine. The emotional import of a play. I mean, a play is designed by a playwright to specifically take you on an emotional journey. So, you know, if, you know, almost without your, you know, wanting to or whatever, you can be very much caught up in the, that emotional journey, and so it becomes extremely powerful, a powerful thing to play on your mind. And maybe, I don't know, I'm just making up this answer, like all professors do. But I think it's the on location, in your face, live people, power of the message. It can be extremely powerful in, like, working on the minds of children, you know, or so. And maybe that's why people react so heavily to maybe offensive stuff that they consider offensive in live theater, as opposed to like a print ad, you know. I still can't think of the name of that place, but anyway. Okay, anyway. Am I being...
We can do one more brief question and then we'll have to wrap up. What's that?
I don't want to double question if anybody else.
Oh, okay, because I think we need, because it's
I have a question, but it's really off subject.
Okay.
Not really.
Where did I get this?
Yeah, actually. No. Have you ever seen the Broadway show Rain, a tribute to the Beatles?
No, I have
No?
not.
Okay, I just wanted to know. I wanted your input. I'm seeing it tonight.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
Great.
I don't know. I
Congratulations.
just wanted
Okay.
to
Good.
pick your brain.
All right.
I want to, everybody, please give Dr. Byars a round of applause.